Morning, everybody. This is your geography lesson for the week beginning the 11th of May. And this week we're going to build on the work we did last week, which was building on that in the rich countries of the world. We have this, what we call this aging population. So what that really means is we have increasing numbers of elderly when compared to the numbers of young that we have. Now that is in itself not a problem. People can choose to be any age. But one of the sort of the main difficulties with having large numbers of elderly compared to young is that elderly have a range of problems that the young don't have. And one of those is to do with their health and also with their mobility. So certainly as you get into the very old ages, once you start to get into your 70s and 80s, it's likely that you're going to start experiencing difficulties in getting around, in looking after your home. You're going to have an increased need for some kind of care, possibly, and that could be in your own home, or it might need be a care elsewhere. It's also very likely you're going to have to increase the amount of health care that you require to look after you as you get older. So these are some of the problems that today's lesson is going to look at. Not so much the problems, but how do we actually manage these challenges? Because in Scotland, in the 21st century, this is going to be a problem or a challenge, I should say, because it's not really a problem, it's just a challenge that Scotland's going to have to look at and think about as we move forward. And as guys become the adults of the world and start to think about what kind of Scotland you're going to shape in the future, this is going to be a big issue as you enter that next phase of your life. So what can we do? First thing I'd like you to do in today's lesson is just write the heading in your virtual jotter. How do we manage the challenges of an aging population? And then just have a little read of this first paragraph here. And this just outlines what I've just said, that we have more and more elderly people. We saw that last week, especially in the case of Japan, and it's also a problem in Scotland. And because we know this is happening, because we are having fewer children today than ever before, and that we are also living into very old ages, increasingly more and more of us, what is the future going to create for us, and what do we have to do? So the first task I'd like to do is think about, just using your own ideas, what are the challenges that an elderly person faces in their day-to-day life? Now, it's likely you have good close contact with your grandparents, and you might see some of the things that they have to do to get through their day that are a bit different from you. And it might be simple things like moving around their house. If they have stairs, there may be an issue, if they're certainly maybe in their 80s. You might have issues to do with maybe their memory not being as good as it used to. But then think about going to the shops and getting in a car and driving around, and all of the kind of the things that a younger person, a young adult, wouldn't you think twice about, becomes an issue for an elderly person. And write a description. And in this particular piece of work here, as I've said at this point here, we're going to credit you with points that you describe, and not list. So don't you can bullet point it, but make sure each point is described, why it is actually a possible problem. So we're looking for at least a paragraph of your ideas here. Right. So once you can pause if you want, or you can just continue through the rest of the lesson. The next job for you is to do this task here, which is another little bit of reading, which is to do with housing. Okay. And housing is a big issue for elderly people, and specifically because often they have lived in a house through their adult life, had children in that house, children have now left, and they're getting to that point in their life where they decide, can we continue to look after this house? These are lots of jobs done all the time, whether that's walls painted or gardening done or fixed, and we're getting to that point in life where those things take time and they're difficult. So do we adapt our house for us to make it easier for us to live in this house we've always lived in, or do we think about some other kind of option? Now, the other options are largely dependent on what particular, often physical difficulties or disabilities you might develop as you get older. So what I'd like you to do for the actual task that goes with this, I'd like to visit this NHS website and have a look at the range of types of houses that are available to people in Scotland and in the UK in general, and just write a sentence about what each type of housing is and what actually it provides for elderly people. Now, clearly, because we have all these different solutions available to us in the future with more elderly, we're going to have to think about building more of these different solutions to make sure all of them are available for our population as we move forward. And you might be living in a place where you've seen a lot of housing being built recently specifically for the elderly. Just along the road where I live in Perth, across from Perth Leisure Centre, there's a large elderly housing development being built at the moment, which provides a little flat for elderly people to live in, with a bathroom and a small kitchen area. But there's also a common social area for all these people to meet. There will also be a care warden in each of the sort of apartment blocks. So that's for something of maybe an elderly couple who have a large house and needing something small that they can manage. That's also got some people around who can look after them. Right, you might want to pause this now and complete this task, or you can move on to the next task. And for this next task, I have looked at the house of the future with all of the different technologies that we are now starting to develop, not just for old people, but for all of us, that we are starting to see in our own homes. So, for example, down here, we've got cleaning vacuum cleaners that are robotically driven, that don't need pushed around. We have smart technologies everywhere in our homes now. It's over from where I'm sitting at the moment. There's an Alexa that I can chat to and I can ask questions to, and that Alexa can then direct other things in the house and control those. So that's the kind of technology that's coming into place. I'd like you to pick 3 of these technologies in the house and explain how that technology actually solves a problem for the elderly. So we just scroll up and have a little look at the task. The key word here is explain, not describe. So I want you to say, right, for example, if you pick the microphone, why would you want a microphone in an elderly person's home? What would that make it easier for them to do? Or if you had a medication control center or lighting control that was digital and voice activated, what particular thing would it make easier for that for an elderly person? So pick any 3 that you want from this house of the future and answer that task. Okay, last couple of tasks now. This second last task will take you to an infographic, and this is about cities of the future. I really like the idea that cities are changing, and they're not just people's houses, but actually whole cities. So I'm just waiting for this little image to load up. So, for example, if we just think about the ways our cities are adapting, like buildings, we're increasing ramps. We're seeing the buttons for pedestrian crossings put at lower levels, so people in wheelchairs can easily press the button to get across a road. Little subtle changes that starting to pop up, and you probably don't notice them at your age, but if you're an elderly person, they really make your life easier. So what I'd like you to do is select this infographic. So view this, click on that, and then you'll be able to scroll down. It's just taking a little bit of time. I'm just going to come out of this for a second and see if I can get it to work. Okay, I'm going to try clicking on this icon down here. Hopefully that will bring it up. Was that just bringing up the same thing? Oh, here we are. So here's the actual infographic I'd like to read. So there's lots of interesting facts about the elderly population in this. If you look closely at the screen, it talks about where the elderly people all live and the different amounts. You've then got this little graphic that shows that the huge number of the population over 60 are found in Europe. And that's because we are the richest continent. We have the ability to keep people alive much longer than elsewhere in the world. And then we have an outline of is an age-friendly city. So here we have, according to the World Health Organization, the sort of 5 key attributes for an elderly friendly city. And the main thing I'd like to look at, and you can either visit the infographic or you can use this lesson video and pause it, is what really matters to the elderly. If we're going to create an elderly friendly city, we need to think about transportation. We need to think about outdoor spaces for the elderly. We need to think about housing. We've already actually thought about that in today's lesson. We need to think about respect and social inclusion. We need services that bring the elderly into our society and don't isolate them from everyone else. We need to think about things that for elderly to do, especially because they're often retired and they don't work anymore. We need to think about possible jobs for them to do that they can actually work into their older age. Think about a lot of shops that actually employ older people, and how if you're an old person, you might actually still want to work. Why do older people increasingly not want to retire? We need to think about ways that all people can get access to information, especially because older people are often not so good at technology as we are in our younger years. So how do we make sure they can access all the things that you can, even though they might not be as good at technology? And finally, how can we support them in the community and provide health services? So I'd like to pick sort of 2 or 3, maybe 4 of these ideas and just sort of describe how we can build our cities to make sure they are friendlier for old people thinking about these 8 different ideas. Shouldn't need to write about all, but I'd like to pick at least 3, and I'll leave it up to you to decide how many ideas you want to choose. Okay, our last task, and by the way, this lesson is for 2 weeks, so it's not just for this week. You've got to the following Thursday to complete it. Because this lesson would cover a couple of 3 lessons in class. Our last task is for you to think about Japan again. We were looking at Japan last week. We were thinking about the huge numbers of elderly, and Japan's been in that position for a long time. So what Japan has had to do is start to change and adapt. And if you watch this YouTube video, it's a really interesting video because it talks a lot about the different things that Japan's having to do in order to adapt to this changing world that Japan finds itself in. For example, one of the things they talk about is the use of robots, and that robots can do a lot of things that humans do, and especially because Japan has far fewer young people who are often involved in other types of work, they're requiring robots. But there's lots of other things they discuss in this program about what Japan has been introducing to help deal with the problems. So what I'd like to do is describe a few of those solutions that Japan is using. When you describe it, you need to actually tell me not just what the solution is, but what is it solving? So if you tell me about a robot, then what particular problem are robots helping solve for elderly people? Okay. And obviously what we will be looking at there is the length of your feedback. Now, you'll have noticed I changed this during the lesson today. So you have till Thursday the 21st of May to complete this task. So that's going to cover a 2-week period. So you don't need to get all of these tasks done straight away. Make sure you do them all in your virtual Jota. Obviously, we are interested when you do describe your answers that you add detail and you describe as much as you can. There is an explain question in there that I talked about earlier. Explaining is where you give because statements, where you give reasons for why you're saying what you're saying. And once you've done that, make sure you hand it in, and Mr. Anderson and myself will give you feedback and return your Jota by Friday, the 22nd of May. Okay, so good luck. And if you've got any questions about today's lesson, please email your teacher, either myself or Mr. Anderson.